Story number 1. The room beneath Dunn's General. No one in Blackridge asked about the basement under Dunn's General Store. Not even after the smell started. It was the only store within 30 miles. Old, creaky, overstocked with off-brand cereal and canned peaches with faded labels. Dunn himself, Walter Dunn, wasn't what you'd call friendly, but he was consistent. Always behind the counter, always scribbling in a ledger. Even when you weren't buying anything, he watched you like you were stealing. He never talked much, but you knew when he didn't want something discussed. The basement, for example. It had a hatch in the back room, tucked behind shelves of bleach and rat poison. Big metal padlock. Thick chain. Some kids tried picking it years ago. One of them ended up with a broken arm. Claimed he fell off his bike, but everyone knew he hadn't ridden it that day. Then came the smell. It crept up through the floorboards, faint at first. Like mildew or spoiled meat. Dunn claimed something had died in the walls, maybe a possum. He hired a guy to look, but the guy never came back. Later, people said he moved out of town. But his truck was found a week later, abandoned 5 miles into the woods with the keys still in the ignition. Still, no one pushed Dunn. If he wanted to let something rot in his basement, that was his business. Until Callie Meyer disappeared. She was 17, always wore a jean jacket with, "Heaven doesn't want me," scribbled across the back in red sharply. Her mom worked at the post office. Last place Callie was seen was the general store, right around closing. Dunn said she left after buying a bottle of Coke. No one saw her leave. The sheriff, Donathan Reed, who had a limp and a drinking problem, asked a few questions. He poked around the store. Even asked Dunn about the basement. Dunn pointed at the lock and said, "You got a warrant?" Donathan never followed up. Everyone figured he owed Dunn something. 2 weeks later, another kid disappeared. Caleb Griggs, 15, liked riding dirt bikes in the old mill trails. Last seen heading to the store for beef jerky and a Monster. Same story. No one saw him leave. Store cameras had been malfunctioning. By the time the third kid went missing, a girl named Lacey Brennan, folks started whispering. Not just about the kids, about the store. About what Dunn might be hiding under that hatch. But Dunn stayed the same. Quiet. Steady. Watching. It was Henry Pratt who cracked first. He was the town drunk, lived above the old laundromat, survived off canned ravioli and spike. One night he came stumbling into the bar screaming that he'd seen something through the basement hatch. Said it blinked at him. Said it didn't have a face, just folds. People laughed, but not hard. Not like before. 2 nights later, Henry's apartment caught fire. His body was never found. That was when Micah decided to break in. Micah Talbot was 19, built like a scarecrow, always wore his dad's old flannel. He'd grown up with Callie. Loved her, probably, though he never said so. After she vanished, something in him went brittle. He waited until the store closed. Knew Dunn would take his nightly walk around the back alley, 10 minutes, like clockwork. Micah slipped in through the window in the men's room. He brought bolt cutters. The hatch was heavier than he expected. When he finally got it open, the smell hit him. Not rot. Something worse. Metallic, wet, like rust and old sweat and something sour underneath. He climbed down the ladder. The basement wasn't made of stone or brick like you'd expect. It was all dirt. Dirt walls, dirt floor, ceiling low enough to brush his head. But the space stretched wider than the store above. Way wider. He walked, flashlight trembling in his grip. That's when he saw the door. Not a normal door. This one was flesh colored. It pulsed slightly, like it had veins. When he got close, it shivered. Micah didn't want to touch it. But he thought of Callie, of her jean jacket, and he reached out. The door opened without a sound. Inside, it was quiet. The walls were smooth and curved, almost like the inside of a ribcage. The air was thick, heavy. There were no shelves, no boxes, nothing that suggested storage. Just rows of small, child-sized chairs, wooden, all facing one direction. And at the front, something that might have been a pulpit. But it looked too organic. Like it had grown there. Then came the sound. A low hum, almost like someone whispering right in his ear but too low to understand. It made his skin crawl. Micah turned to run. But standing in the doorway was done. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice calm. "What is this?" Micah asked. "What the hell is this?" Dunn smiled. "It's older than the store. Older than the town." He stepped aside. Behind him, something moved. It didn't walk, it slithered. No limbs. Just flesh and mouths. Too many mouths. Micah didn't scream. He tried to run, but the floor shifted, sucked at his feet like wet clay. The thing reached him. They found the hatch open the next morning. Dunn was gone. So was Micah. The basement had collapsed. Just dirt now. No ladder, no hatch, no room. Sheriff Reed quit the next week. Moved to Nebraska. Told people he was done with places that whisper. No more kids disappeared. But the store remains. Empty. Quiet. Still smells a little off. Some nights, if you stand in the back and press your ear to the floor, you can hear chairs scraping. As if someone's still down there, adjusting for the sermon. Story number 2. The New Town Ordinance. When the town of Fairling passed Ordinance 237, no one noticed at first. It was buried in the minutes of a council meeting, right after a motion to repair a pothole on Main and before the approval of the annual Harvest Festival permit. Officially, Ordinance 237 authorized the creation of a Public Harmony Committee, funded by a small reallocation of the town's discretionary budget. No one knew what it meant. No one cared. The first sign something was wrong came the following Monday, when Mrs. Palmer was removed from her front porch. She had been sitting in her usual rocking chair, wrapped in a crocheted blanket, drinking sweet tea from the same cup she'd used every morning since her husband died in '98. Her neighbors said she looked peaceful. Until the van came. It was unmarked. Matte gray. 2 men stepped out, dressed in dark green uniforms with no insignias. They walked up, said something to Mrs. Palmer, then gently lifted her from the chair. She didn't resist. She didn't say a word. They helped her into the back of the van and drove away. Her house was quiet for days. Then, someone else moved in. A young couple with 2 perfect teeth and the same haircut. The neighbors said their voices sounded synchronized. Like they'd rehearsed every sentence. By the time people started asking questions, Mrs. Palmer's name had been removed from every public record. Property ownership, voting rolls, even the donation plaque at the library. Gone. Like she'd never existed. Then came the Harmony flyers. Printed on thick, glossy paper, taped to every pole and pinned to every door. They featured smiling families and phrases like, "Harmony is happiness. Together, we thrive. Let's all be on the same page." Beneath the slogans, in smaller text, brought to you by the Fairling Public Harmony Committee. More vans came. A man who shouted too loud at a football game vanished mid-argument. A teenager who posted a meme about the mayor was taken during lunch at school. A bar owner who played heavy metal on weekends disappeared between sets. Every time someone vanished, their home was scrubbed clean. A new resident appeared within 48 hours. Always polite. Always agreeable. Always smiling. Local news stopped reporting anything outside of weather and bake sales. A low-frequency hum began playing from speakers mounted around town. Just below the range of hearing, unless you stood still long enough. Then you'd feel it. Deep in your teeth. The mayor assured everyone it was part of the municipal calibration process. People nodded, even if they didn't know what that meant. It was easier to nod. James Morley didn't nod. He ran the hardware store on 5th and Main. Been there 32 years. Still used a paper ledger, still stocked the weird old screws no one made anymore. He'd watched the town change with slow horror. The way people stopped asking questions. The way neighbors turned into strangers. He kept a journal. Wrote everything down. Every van. Every face. Every change in signage and tone and cadence of speech. He stopped going to church the day they replaced Father Connolly with someone who never blinked. He started carrying a pistol behind the register. Then his niece disappeared. Madeline was 17. Spoke fluent sarcasm, dyed her hair every week, loved indie horror films. She wasn't rebellious, just sharp. She made a joke on her vlog about the Stepford town vibe of Fairlane. The next morning, she was gone. Her bedroom was pristine. Her hard drive had been wiped. Her clothes replaced with generic labeled dresses. James snapped. He stopped opening the shop. He set up motion detectors, printed flyers with QR codes linking to news articles about similar cases, old cults, reprogramming centers, psychological warfare tactics. But the QR codes stopped working. The articles vanished. Then his internet went out. His cell phone wouldn't connect. His landline rang once every night at 3:13 a.m., but no one ever spoke on the other end. One night, he heard movement in the store. Checked the cameras. Nothing there. He stayed up for days. Taped black cloth over the windows. Kept the gun within arm's reach. The new people, he called them echoes, started coming by. Always in pairs. Always smiling. Just checking in, James, they'd say. Making sure you're harmonizing. He said nothing. Shut the door in their faces. The next night, his power cut out. He lit candles. Sat in silence. Watched the street. At 2 a.m., the humming got louder. It pulsed. It felt like a second heartbeat in his skull. Then, the knock. 3 slow raps on the back door. He raised the gun. Moved quiet. Stepped around the corner. Another knock. Closer now, though the door hadn't opened. He flicked on the flashlight. No one there. But in the dust on the floor, footprints. Bare. Child-sized. They led to the hatch beneath the stairs. He hadn't used it in years. He opened it. Beneath the store, a tunnel. Carved clean into the soil. The walls were smooth, unnaturally smooth, like they'd been melted. He followed it. It went deeper than it should have. Maybe a mile. Then it opened into a chamber. Circular. Lit by that same low-frequency hum. No bulbs, no visible source of power. Just glowing panels pulsing like veins. And standing in the center, dozens of them. Echoes. They stood motionless, eyes closed, hands held in front like they were praying. James stepped closer. None of them moved. He saw Madeline. She was smiling. But the smile didn't reach her eyes. He whispered her name. She didn't blink. Then he saw it. In the center of the chamber, a pillar. Flesh-like, but not human. It throbbed. A wet sound, almost like breathing. Tendrils extended from its base, plugged into the backs of the echoes' necks. James backed away. Too late. The humming spiked. His vision blurred. The walls seemed to ripple. He ran. He doesn't remember getting home. But the next morning, the tunnel was gone. Replaced with dirt. As if it had never been dug. He tried to tell someone. Anyone. But when he spoke, the words came out wrong. He tried to say, "They're replacing us," but his mouth said, "Harmony is happiness." He screamed. But no sound came out. The shop reopened the next day. James smiled at customers. Asked about their kids. Restocked the same screwdrivers over and over. He doesn't write in his journal anymore. But if you go in on a rainy day, when the humming is loudest, and ask about Madeline, his left eye twitches. Just once. Then he smiles. And says, "I don't think anyone by that name ever lived here." Story number 3. The attic above apartment B. No one wanted to live in apartment B. It wasn't the rats or the flickering lights or the water that came out brown for the first 5 seconds. Everyone expected that in an old walk-up like the Lowell Arms. What people couldn't explain was the sound from the attic. The one that wasn't supposed to exist. The building had 3 floors. The attic door sat directly above apartment B, in a small stretch of ceiling between floors 2 and 3. The landlord, Mr. Crane, claimed it was sealed shut, left over from an older design. Just insulation and beams, he'd say. Nothing up there. But tenants reported noises. Late at night. Not rats or pipes, rhythmic dragging, like someone pulling something heavy across floorboards. Then came the breathing. It wasn't always loud. But when the room got quiet, when the fridge clicked off and the neighbors stopped yelling and the faucet dripped its last echo, you'd hear it. Soft. Wet. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. A slow cycle. Inhumanly steady. Like something didn't need to rest. People didn't stay long in apartment B. The longest was a grad student named Laura. She made it 7 months. Said the noises stopped if she played static on her radio. Slept with it on every night. Then one morning she was gone. Rent paid, dishes washed, bed made. Her notes on the kitchen counter, a stack of journals filled with diagrams, floor plans, and repeated phrases. The attic isn't above. It's around. It opens when it listens. Don't acknowledge the breath. It learns your pattern. After Laura, the unit sat vacant for a while. Until Cameron moved in. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in rent control and convenience. He worked overnight shifts as a security guard and liked that the apartment stayed cool in summer. He heard the noises the first night. Lying on his back in the dark, ceiling fan still, fridge humming. Drag. Stop. Drag. Stop. Then silence. Then, breath. It didn't startle him. Not exactly. He thought maybe it was water settling. Whined through an old vent. His body wanted to believe that. But his brain knew better. Still, he ignored it. Nights passed. The noise didn't change. But it didn't escalate either. Until the doorknob turned. At 3:41 a.m., Cameron was halfway through a podcast when he heard the soft click of the front doorknob. Not rattling, turning. Slow. Intentional. He froze. The knob twisted, paused, then turned the other way. He grabbed the bat from under his bed and tiptoed to the door. Nothing. No footsteps outside. No note. No sign of a break-in. He installed a deadbolt the next day. That night, the dragging started again. Louder. Slower. And then came the whispers. Not words. Not at first. Just murmurs. Like someone practicing syllables. He told Mr. Crane. The landlord chuckled, said, the place just creaks. Old Wood remembers things. Cameron didn't like that sentence. The way he said, remembers. Still, he stayed. Pride, maybe. Stubbornness. Until he found the hatch. It was hidden behind a ceiling tile in the hallway closet. He only noticed it because of the draft, a slow, cold trickle of air that brushed his hair when he stood too long near the coats. He climbed up with a flashlight. Above him, the attic. Not insulation. Not beams. A hallway. Longer than the building allowed. He walked. The air got colder. The walls were not walls. They pulsed slightly. Like skin under tension. He shined his light on the floor. Footprints. Human. Bare. But wrong. The toes were too long. The arch too high. And some had 7 digits. He turned back. But the attic didn't end. He walked for what felt like an hour. No turns. No doors. Just that long hallway, with the same flickering bulb swinging every 20 feet. Then, finally, he saw a hatch. He opened it. It led directly back into his apartment. But everything was wrong. The furniture was arranged just slightly off. The cereal box on the counter had a different logo. His photos weren't his. Same poses, same people, but the faces were just wrong enough to make his stomach churn. He ran outside. Same street. Same cars. But no birds. No wind. And everyone who walked past him stared. Smiling. Too wide. Too still. He ran back inside and slammed the hatch shut. The next morning, it was gone. The ceiling tile was just a tile again. He tried to forget. But then his voicemail started glitching. Every message started with a sound: inhale, hold, exhale. He changed numbers. It followed. Then came the dreams. He was standing in the attic, staring at himself. But he was wrong. Paler. Lips stitched shut. And behind him, a mass. A shape with too many joints. Its breath filled the space. He started recording the attic. Left his phone in the closet, aimed upward. Nothing. Until one night, the file played back a voice. You brought it back with you. He tried moving. Packed up, broke the lease, paid a penalty. Moved across town. No attic. No sounds. But on his first night, at 3:41 a.m., the doorknob turned. Back in apartment B, the unit is listed again. The ad reads: cozy 1-bedroom with character. Classic charm. Quiet nights. Attic sealed for insulation. No pets. The radio static still works. For a while. The Hollow Whisper. There was a legend, or perhaps it was just a story passed down to each generation by the old folk in the small town of Pine Hollow. The town itself wasn't much, just a cluster of cabins, a single road that snaked between them, and a forest that pressed in from all sides. Pine Hollow was a place where life moved slowly, and the land seemed untouched by the modern world. It was a peaceful place. That is, until the fog came. The first time it happened, the fog rolled in thick and heavy from the east, draping over the trees like a suffocating blanket. It was early autumn, and the leaves had just begun to change. It wasn't unusual for fog to settle over the town. After all, Pine Hollow was surrounded by dense woods and rolling hills, but this was different. This fog had a presence to it, something that felt unnatural, something that made the air taste sour. The people of Pine Hollow had always known to avoid the forest at night. There were stories. Old ones, passed down through the generations. Tales of people who had ventured too far into the woods, who had disappeared, never to be seen again. They said that the forest had eyes, that it was a place where the line between the living and the dead grew thin, and that sometimes, the dead would walk among the trees. No one ever believed the stories. They were just that, stories. Until the fog arrived. It was that night that Sarah, a young woman who had just moved into Pine Hollow, learned what it truly meant to listen to the old folk. Sarah had always been a skeptic, the type of person who believed in science and reason above all else. She didn't believe in ghosts, spirits, or anything that couldn't be proven. But that night, as the fog settled over the town, she felt an unease that she couldn't explain. She had been out walking in the woods, just a short distance from town, when the fog began to creep in. It moved quickly, too quickly for something so thick. She could barely see a few feet in front of her as the mist enveloped everything. She tried to turn back, but it was as though the fog had swallowed the path. She had no choice but to keep walking, hoping that the fog would clear, or that she would find her way back to town. But the more she walked, the deeper the fog seemed to grow. It felt alive, swirling around her, pulling her deeper into the forest. It was then that she heard it, a whisper, soft and distant, like a breath against her ear. It wasn't a sound, but a feeling, a presence. It made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. "Sarah," the voice whispered. She froze. The voice was unmistakable, it was her name, but there was something wrong about it. It sounded like her voice, but deeper, raspier, as if it had been twisted by something that wasn't human. She turned around, but there was no one there. Just the fog, thick and swirling, covering the trees like a suffocating blanket. Her pulse quickened, and her breath came in short gasps. She wanted to call out, to scream, but she couldn't move. Her feet felt rooted to the ground, as though the earth itself was holding her in place. The whisper came again, this time closer. "Sarah." She looked around frantically, but still, there was nothing. No sign of movement, no shadow in the fog. Just the suffocating silence, broken only by the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. And then, from the distance, she saw it, a figure, standing motionless in the mist. At first, she thought it was just a trick of the fog, but as she took a step closer, she saw it more clearly. The figure was tall, almost impossibly so. It was human, but not quite. Its face was hidden in the shadow of its hood, its body cloaked in tattered robes that seemed to blend into the mist itself. The air around it seemed to shimmer, as though it wasn't fully part of the world around it. "Who are you?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling despite her attempts to sound confident. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised its hand, pointing directly at her. Its fingers were long and unnaturally thin, ending in sharp, black claws that looked like they had been carved from stone. The moment it pointed at her, Sarah felt a cold, nauseating sensation wash over her. It was as if the figure's gaze was cutting into her very soul, as if it knew things about her that she hadn't even realized. "Come closer," it whispered again. Sarah's body tensed, her mind screaming at her to run, to get away. But her feet wouldn't move. The fog had seeped into her bones, and she couldn't escape. The figure took a step forward, and another, its long, inhuman form moving with unnerving speed. And then, the fog seemed to part, just enough for Sarah to see what was behind it. There was a path, a narrow trail that wound deeper into the forest. It hadn't been there before, but now it was clear, as though it had always been there, waiting for her to find it. The figure gestured toward the path, its fingers twisted and beckoning. "Come closer." Without thinking, Sarah took a step forward, then another. It was as if something was pulling her, drawing her deeper into the forest, into the unknown. The whispering voice in her mind grew louder, more insistent. "Come closer." And before she knew it, she was walking, following the path, the figure behind her. The trees seemed to close in on either side, their branches twisting like gnarled hands. The fog thickened, curling around her, until it felt like the very world had shrunk to this single path. The further she walked, the more the air grew cold, and the whispers around her grew louder, overlapping, until they were no longer just whispers, but full voices. They spoke of things Sarah didn't understand, of forgotten places, of roads that led nowhere, of things lost to time. The ground beneath her feet seemed to shift, growing softer, as though the earth itself was alive. And then, she saw it. The clearing. At the center of the clearing stood a tree, tall, ancient, with bark as black as coal. Its branches twisted upward, reaching for the sky like fingers clawing at the heavens. Beneath it, in the center of the roots, was a stone. The stone was smooth, but cracked, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to shift as she looked at them. The figure stopped just outside the clearing, standing still as if waiting for something. Sarah's legs were trembling as she stepped closer to the stone, drawn to it by something she couldn't explain. As her hand reached out to touch it, the world around her seemed to stop. The fog, the whispers, the trees, they all froze. The stone's surface shuddered, and the ground beneath her feet cracked open. A voice, clear and loud, echoed in the clearing. It wasn't a whisper anymore, but a command. Welcome to the hollow. The ground beneath Sarah's feet began to twist and bend. The fog swirled around her like a whirlwind, pulling her into the earth itself. She screamed, but no sound escaped her mouth. The stone pulsed, its glow growing brighter, and the air was filled with the feeling of something ancient, something powerful. And then, as quickly as it had started, everything stopped. The fog cleared, the ground settled, and Sarah was alone. The figure was gone, as was the path she had followed. She was standing in the clearing, surrounded by the twisted trees. The air was still, and the only sound was the soft rustling of the leaves in the distance. But the stone remained, its symbols now glowing softly in the dark, as though waiting for her to return. The hollow had claimed her.